Issues here.
Right, well, we're back in your ears after a little bit of a break over the summer. Quite amazingly, we're up to episode 40 of the MalTravAle Podcast. And today we're going to finish off our A to Z ramble through beery trips, beers, breweries, etc. So I'll turn the music off and good evening, gentlemen. How are we?
Oh, fine, thank you. Yourself, yes. It's a while to be here, isn't it, really?
Yes, a few weeks that we've all had a bit of apart from Nick's been working. I put on the Twitter feed the other day that me and Bruce have been off enjoying ourselves, and Nick's been working. So we're recording this on Sunday, the 21st of August. August seems to have flown by, scarily. We've just been talking about football with some great football, some Yorkshire and North East football today. So Leeds have beaten Chelsea and Newcastle have drawn with Man City.
It's should have won.
Great atmosphere there, Bruce, in that stadium, though. I thought you might wonder whether you and Ben had got up there.
Sadly, it's almost impossible to get a ticket now. And I think realistically, even if I'm on the waiting list now for a season ticket, I might die before I get a place. Great, I'm only 55. But,
and I presume
you would have been struggling with trains anyway, Bruce.
Oh, that's true.
Back to normal today.
But presume those big games as well pretty much sell out, don't they? All those games like
they all seem to go. Then the members go to So I think for the foreseeable future, like FA Cup games, EFL games. I mean, they're in a difficult position in terms of expanding the ground as well, aren't they? With that Lazy's end there. So
it's not massive. So as I said, we're going to finish up our A to Z. So would you believe I reckon we've covered 22 letters, or we will have covered by the end of this one, 22 letters. So there are 4 letters left, although 3 of those letters are X, Y, and Z. So we did actually take those out of the bag at the start of this process.
Why? X would be good, wouldn't it? Z you could probably do, but X would be tough, wouldn't it?
So we might try and do those, though. We might try those. And then any idea what letter that we kind of okay letter that we haven't covered? So today we're going to do E, R, and S. We did A, B, C right at the very start, 8 weeks or 8 podcasts ago. Any idea which T we haven't covered? So which letter I've given away, don't I?
T. T. Is it T?
So T is a letter that I don't think we've covered. So quickfire, T's. What would we go for?
Tetley's.
Thornbridge.
So Nick would go for Thornbridge. Go on, Nicholas. Where would you go for Thornbridge?
Thornbridge, Jaipur. Thornbridge, whichever you want to go for. Decent brewery setup. In fact, I was going to have a can of Jaipur tonight because it was on offer in Lidl the other day, 4 cans for $4.49. But then I found this cheeky little number in the back of my fridge that you got with my cup.
All right. Right. Okay.
Seeing it's the middle of summer, I'm going to have a micro brew, Christmas pudding and vanilla custard stout. The can itself looks a bit bashed around, so I'm a bit... Well, if I open this up and it goes all over my living room carpet, I'm not going to be very happy. But
I think I bought you both one of those for Christmas, if I'm rightly. My little box that I sent you both. I think I've got you both one of those. Well, actually, as if by magic, I'm actually drinking the Thornbridge tonight because I'm on my box has been, and again, as always, it's a little bit mad. So I'm on their Zara, which is a hybrid beer, which is a brewed like an ale and conditioned like a lager. So that's very nice. So Nick's picked Thornbridge, and it actually is the peak end of this weekend, actually. And I've been watching it. It looks like they've been, the weather's been okay, I think. I mean, if it was been last weekend, it'd be fantastic. So that seems to have gone very well. So Nicholas is now pouring his, Christmas whatever stout. It looks all
Christmas pudding and vanilla. Hey, it's got a custardy head anyway.
Yeah, it looks like that.
So
there's no point asking Bruce because he's been the bubble often anyway.
Actually, I've had a couple of beers and my friend's been out at 9 o'clock, and I've just had a large glass of red wine as well.
So mine looks very nice. Mine looks a very, very clear. Like I said, this is a what do they call it? This is a Colne style beer, so very, very nice. So Nick's picked Thornbridge. I probably would pick Thornbridge. I'd probably pick their brewery tap which I know we've mentioned a few times on the podcast. Bruce, now you've picked Tetley's. Now, Tetley's, you can go and get a pint of Tetley's, can't you?
Yeah, but not the Tetley's we all know and loved. It's been now it's been moved from Leeds to Northampton. Now I think it's back in the hands of Leeds Brewery brewing it again out there in Leeds.
But they're not brewing the bitter, aren't they? Brewing a Tetley Pale Ale. It's not Tetley bitter. I thought that was being brewed. Oh, no, that was Bath that was being brewed in Lancashire. I think you're right. There is still a Tetley bitter. You can actually go to the old Tetley headquarters, can't you, in Leeds?
Yeah, down in Granary Wharf. There's all sorts of posh apartments down there now. There's a very good steakhouse, but it is hard. I mean, one of those things, a bit like the sort of was it Monkeys leaving Gibraltar? I don't think anybody ever thought Tetley would leave Leeds. It just seemed to be ingrained in the city and was such a massive brand. I mean, it was only about 12, 15 years ago. They were sponsoring the English cricket team. They were everywhere, weren't they? And I don't think anybody thought it would go. But they leave a legacy of some fantastic pubs, some which are preserved, and some sadly.
Well, I had a pint of the Spotty Cow last weekend. It was all right. The beer was all right. Not so much sure about the pub, really.
And was that Tetley's you were drinking, Nick?
Yeah. Because
Pub's reopened then. This is our pub in Malta.
Yeah, well, they made a big thing about doing a soft opening, and they had a photograph in the local press of the landlord and his partner and Lord Nil Leyland, obviously the chap who owns Malton, and his son stood outside the pub. Mentioned that they were having Tetley's on in homage to it, the fact that it was a Tetley's heritage pub. Yeah. And I read the article. It said they had 6 beers on. I was a little bit disappointed though when I walked in, and those 6 beers were Tetley's, Guinness, a lager, 2 lagers, and then probably a cider. So they weren't beers as such. That's what they had on the bar. But yeah, the Tetley's was okay. The girl behind the bar, or the lady behind the bar, sort of like, when I asked her how much it was, she sort of paused, put her eyes up in the sky and went, £5. And then realised why. God. Because they didn't have a till. They had a plate behind the bar with a load of money on it. So how long it's going to be open for, I don't know. But yeah. But the Tetley's was okay. The Tetley's was fine. So, but yeah, it'd be interested to know where it is brewed nowadays.
So, well, I've just been looking now. So Tetley's, they call it Tetley's Original Bitter now. And that's actually brewed by Marston's Carlsberg. So I presume it's brewed in Burton-on-Trent.
Yeah, well, in the supermarkets, you see more of that Tetley's lager. You brew a Tetley's lager now, but you see more of that than the good old Tetley's bitter.
Oh, actually, it says, I think Banksy's brewery, actually. And then basically, Bruce mentioned Leeds Brewery. They brew the number 3 pale ale with a Tetley's brand on it. So there you go. So, okay, so that was our tea. So quick catch up then. And again, we probably haven't going to do this justice really. So in terms of beery highlights. So Bruce, you've been on a mini tour of European ports.
Yeah, so over a 12-night cruise. So from beer point of view, where did we go? Well, we went to northern Spain, to A Coruña and Bilbao. I have to say, interesting beer, northern Spain, a great destination. Seems to be a little bit of a craft beer thing going on there, but the dominant beer is the Estrella Galicia, which is brewed there. This is sort of a lower carbonated, darker, really good beer, I'd say, though, and incredibly cheap is northern Spain. You get in the sort of standard, that sort of, was it half litre? It was about €1.80 in most of the places, but it was nice beer. And in supermarkets, you could get a 6-pack for €3.50 or a 12-pack for €5.90. So northern Spain, incredibly cheap. Did seem to be in Coruña a little bit more of an independent beer scene going on, but parasols and brollies, but obviously they want to look at the tourist sites, not to seek those out. Bilbao, again, really cheap. Bilbao, a great city, though, a fantastic, what they're in the market hall there. The half of it is the old market, so it's full of produce. The other half is just astonishingly busy street food market. Lots of places there selling craft beers, though. And again, really reasonable. Great destination, Bilbao. We went to Portugal, to Lisbon and Oporto. Oporto, from a drinking point of view, absolutely fantastic place. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that it's a world capital of port, but to actually go and see it, it's hard to believe what an influence port has on that city, that little tiny drink that barely nobody under 90 drinks now. I mean, one side of the River Douro is just dominated. And we went down the cable car and there was something on eyes. It's just dominated by port bottling plants, by port caves, the warehouses where they keep all these bottles of port. And it's almost got its own infrastructure. All the streets are really old and spoiled and cobbled. Absolutely astonishing, really. You think I was drinking all this port, but yeah, you see all the famous names there: Sandeman's, Graham's, Taylor. So it's almost, we think of those being British-owned houses, don't we? But it literally is just one side of that city, that riverbank, is just dominated by port. And I have to say, they're very fair in terms of giving you it. And you could go to many bar really and try. There are 5 styles of port, to discover when you get there. And you could have a little tasting tray with 5 samples for €5. So great stuff, really, there. In terms of beer, obviously in Porto, and Lisbon, it was all dominated by Superboc and Segres. They do drink pints in Portugal as well, which is quite interesting, but again, not too expensive at all. I did prefer the Superboc of those two. We went to La Rochelle and went to Le Havre in France. A very big shock, I have to say, going from Bilbao to France at 1 minute having a couple of beers, a couple of soft drinks, and spending €8, where we jumped off the cruise boat in La Rochelle, which was very nice. And they have a Cafe Leffy there. Of course, Leffy have this chain of high-end brasseries that do really good food in these major sort of French, Belgium, Spanish destinations. Belgium's full of them. They have a huge rack of tap of beers to try, but incredibly expensive again. Went and chose a beer, son chose one, 2 soft drinks. And from being sort of €8 over in northern Spain, we're suddenly paying €26. So France, incredibly expensive. They need to sit down and have a beer. In fact, I was just on somebody who'd been there recently. They were shocked. But yeah, La Rochelle, lovely, and say, but incredibly expensive. And from
that's because they knew you were British, Bruce.
No, everyone's paying the same.
If you spoke to them in French, it would have been half the price.
No, in France, you also pay for where you drink the beer as well. So
yes,
even the same venue, you might pay different prices depending on where you're sitting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, La Rochelle is dominated, of course, by its harbour, the port, most of these places are. And we did try to go on the back street and get a beer, although British landlords take note. It's rather bizarre because at sort of 10, 11 in the morning, they have these cafes, quite to have you sit there and have a coffee and a beer and take your money. Once it gets 12 o'clock, unless you're buying a sort of 3-course meal, they're really not interested in you as well. Yeah. So I think it'd be lovely if some of these French people wanted to a pub and have 3 pints. The landlord say, "Do you fancy pine chips as well?" You like it, yeah.
But Bruce, then they definitely knew you were British if you were trying to get a pint at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. I mean, it was bad. It was insane. There were just huge amounts of restaurants with a vast tranche of outside seating in La Rochelle, and every couldn't get a table anywhere. So yeah, from Le Havre though, we went to. We got the local bus through the sort of normally countryside with all locals, went to Etretat. To be fair to France, public transport is incredibly cheap though. I mean, it was an hour's ride each way and it was about €2. Lovely ride out through the countryside. I went to Etretat, which is one of these places where French people have out to see. It's a beach bookended by 2 massive cliffs. The cliffs have got natural arches in them, so it's incredibly scenic. There's a old chapel on one of them. You can walk there, get the Petit train. But the town itself was absolutely fantastic, full of all sort of taverns and bars and places to eat. Incredibly fantastic zoomed atmosphere. And we normally say we go into France quite a lot now. A lot of these seaside towns in France are all very similar, really. They've kind of got the part of the build around there, where Etretat was a little bit different. There's a little labyrinth of streets. But like I said, we learned our lesson before. Me and Ben took ourselves off to, we saw a real dirty little tobacco, with all lots of seedy characters and, the window where people bet on the harness racing and about a 12-foot wall of cigars and cigarettes. I'd say smoking's still very popular in France, I have to say. So in there, it was great. They had the Jupiler down there and it was quite reasonable. But yeah, that was a great drinking there. And then we washed up in Belgium at Zeebrugge, where you can see if on YouTube, we went to that famous shop as part of the Bruges Beer Museum. We've got this astonishing shop. It must be the biggest collection of bottled beers, surely in Europe, if not the world. It is absolutely astonishing, that place. Well worth the trip there. And then about 8 on draft as well. But there was nothing. The weakest beer they had on the draft pumps was 9%. So I finished a bit bonkers together. And then finally, we did stop at Blankenberg on the way back as well to our boat. So we like Blankenberg. They've got a huge boardwalk, just end-to-end bars, doing all sorts of different things. There were craft beer ones, or ones with cocktails, ones where you're sat in bean bags, again, heaving with people. And then finally we ended up in Amsterdam, which was absolutely dreadful, really. Amsterdam's quite like a building site. It's they're putting new tram lines in to every approach to the centre of the city. It is just incredibly dirty. It's overcrowded. The place was filthy. It was rammed full of people. And I have to say, the price of stuff there was absolute madness. We went and had a couple of Heinekens, so we got to show them how they took the froth off the stick, a couple of soft drinks, and I think it worked out at about £22. It is insanely expensive in Amsterdam, and definitely needs avoiding to get those tram lines finished. I was expecting at night, I know, but the minute really dreadful. So I know it was great fun. We got to try some lots of different beers, lots of different bar experiences. I have to say, we're on the Carnival Pride ship. There was actually 0 beer on board the boat worth drinking. They had some beer they put on the boat in America, this Red Frog beer that was obviously kept alive by an infusion of pills every week. It looked dreadful. And otherwise, it was $7.50 for a can of Miller Lite. So we weren't partaking in that. I don't know, but Nick's told us about these, what do you call Nick, petrol cans, the very large cans that used to constitute
growlers or
growlers. There were none of those to be had. So so no, it was great fun. But yes,
good holiday. Yeah.
Whilst we moan about the price of beer here after very different experiences, but let's be like that. If you're into craft beers, great prices, great value on all things. Northern Spain is definitely a destination worth considering. And of course, you can get the overnight boat now direct into Santander from Portsmouth. Like you go about 6 hours from Portsmouth to Portsmouth to Le Havre, and the place down there, fab. So it was jolly good fun.
Very good. So that's Bruce's little summary of his summer. So I went off to Greece. So again, there was not a great deal of choice in terms of beer. You could drink quite a few different to the brands. In fact, the hotel had something called VAP on, which actually found it was brewed in rose, and it was all right actually. I mean, over there it was about €3 a pint. And in fact, if you went in the day happy hour, it was getting down €2 a pint.
Wow.
That particular bar on the thing that beer cost me €4, but that was a bit more of a smarter bar, and again sat on the roadside. So that was good fun. It was quite nice though getting back to the UK and drinking some proper beers. So I've had a few nice beers. I've been drinking quite a lot of New Zealand Pale, which seems to be quite popular over the last couple of weeks. So at Stockport Brewery, I think that one on the picture is, and that was really nice. And then I must have had a New Zealand Pale yesterday as well in Stone. And then a little trip out. Ended up in Congleton earlier this week. And again, there's a fairly recent Jewels. We've mentioned Jewels lots and lots of times. Once of Stone, now of Market Drayton. And again, they do kind of a very, it's very Jewelsy. I know me and Nick, we've talked about the Crown Wharf in Stone where I took Nick, and this is their pub, the Prince of Wales in Congleton, and it's had the same. It really is actually. No, it's fortunately, there was only two. There was me and the lad in there, and that was it. That was That was about 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, and there was only 2 of us in the pub. In fact, we were waiting because the Beartown Brewery in Congleton, a bit of an expansion. They've got a couple of pubs now, and their pub opposite didn't open till 4, so we called in here. But yeah, it was quite a nice little pub. And as I say, Nick's been busy working, but he did manage to get a couple of soirees out, and I've met him a couple of times. We've had a couple of beers in Malton as well, and he's got a very nice picture there. For those on YouTube, Nick, you managed to get to Whitby Brewery at least once over the last few weeks.
Yeah, when was that? That was Sunday evening. Yeah, about lovely. 2.5 weeks ago. It was very nice. Hit it right. Managed to get to Driffield Spoons a week last Wednesday. Guess what they had on? They had Thornbridge Jaipur on. So using my vouchers, I had a couple of pints of that, which is 5.5%. I had a bottle of 6.5% Elvis juice for my meal, and I can't remember what my 4th pint was because it was.
I must admit,
it was a good night all round.
I had a Jaipur X the other night. I've been to town a couple of beers in town, and I came home and I was just trying to go through my beer cellar, and the Jaipur X was there. I thought, oh, sod it, I'm going to drink that. And that's 10%. So yeah, that's a bit stronger. But no, it looks very nice at the brewery. It looks busy. It looks like it's still ticking over there, Nick.
Yeah, I went to the Spoons there as well, and unfortunately, they couldn't have the upstairs bar open. Lack of staff is still a massive problem. So we were queuing out the door. They literally had 2 members of staff behind the bar downstairs. As I said, they were allowing people to sit upstairs, but they were saying service on the app only. Of course, you can't use your vouchers on the app, so you've got to queue at the bar. But it was, it was busy. But yeah, these sort of places just crying out for staff. They really are. There's a guy stood behind me. He says, "Oh, look at that!" He says, "They're offering £11 for bar staff, £12 for cleaners. Oh, that's good." He says. I says, "Yeah, your cleaners always get a bit more, but you expect to come in 12 o'clock at night, clean the pub down ready for the morning, or 5 o'clock in the morning." Said, but no, certainly up here, with us being in a more affluent part of Yorkshire in terms of property prices, a lot of what you could call working class jobs. There's just a massive cry out for them. And the problem is
the next, what they're now starting to talk about in some of them. I've got a couple of things just for the newsy bit now. Obviously, the next big hit is going to be energy, isn't it? And what they're saying is, it's been great. We're having wonderful weather for everybody. But of course, businesses, and there's no energy cap for businesses. So, we think our residential prices are going to go up. The cost of keeping a pub open over the winter, it's going to be extortionate. And then certainly around here, we've already started to see quite a lot of pubs are just shutting. In fact, let's move on because we've got a couple of that in the highlights. Before we do that, though, I just thought I'd share this. I don't think you've seen it. I don't share with you yet, gents. I know we've talked about Shetland and Guinness a few times before. I know, Bruce, you follow this guy quite a lot. And he posted this pint a couple of weeks ago. And again, for those not on YouTube, it's in a Wetherspoons. It's a pint of Guinness, which doesn't look too bad, but it's in a Corona extra glass, one of those kind of horrible, looks like a bottle done with the head chopped off it, and it just doesn't look right, does it? So it does say to serve myself a going to spoons and Greenwich spoons. So yeah, Guinness. There we go. So no beer news, yeah. So Wetherspoons, I know we talk about Wetherspoons a lot, but again, they've came out end of last month. They're looking at £30 million losses. And again, I think there are lots of reasons for that. We've talked about some of those before, but I thought it was interesting in that what they're really saying is they're feeling that beer is really being hit. And again, there's something in this next bit here that says, the most popular drink now at Wetherspoons is Pepsi. That's the most bought drink, and at 1.75, is a good deal on the high street. So people are going in and drinking that. We've talked a lot about the 99p beers. Well, now that's moved up to 1.49, hasn't it? Now that's their cheapest beer if you get that in a particular thing. I think Tim Martin was really, the point he was making was about the tax, which again we have mentioned quite a lot. In that, we pay a hell of a lot. I mean, it's interesting, Bruce talking about costs in France, but I guess the Spain and the Portugal, and the Greek, the price of beer puts in perspective, isn't it? That we do pay. I think we pay the highest amount of tax on alcohol and particularly beer in most European countries. And that's that's 44. Is it 11% is beer duty, which is 44p in the 44p per pint, basically, and 11% of beer, 50% of a bottle of wine, and 79% of a bottle of spirits is taxed. So that's one of the things there. But it's a mixed picture.
Well, that one of the things that Spoons are going to contend with is that, and nobody could see this coming. You can't blame him, that he's taken over some of these old buildings. I mean, I think of the Winter Guards in Harrogate. What must it cost?
The cost to keep those, yeah, absolutely.
Heat and light.
It's going to be extortionate. He takes those old buildings, which is a good thing. Now we saw the old newspapers and bright things, but these are buildings with very, very high roofs. He's going to face a few challenges.
And then just to kind of make us all feel even better, despite all already all the doom and gloom. The Sun last week ran a story that they reckon it's going to be £14 a pint in London. But I think they reckon 2023. They reckon that a pint of beer 2025, a pint of beer will cost you £14. And again, the point they're making there is about things like business rates. So again, the point here was that pubs, they pay a roughly 25p a pint in terms of business rate. A supermarket pays 2p for the same product, same alcohol, same beer. You buy at the supermarket, it's 2p. And obviously VAT, etc. They've had some tax breaks, but again, those have all come back on now. So again, worrying. And of course, the knock on of that is that we see pubs are kind of closing, as mentioned. And I know Stoke-on-Trent apparently is one of the 2 areas in the country that's seeing the most closure of pubs. But at the same time, the Modern Advertiser was saying that 200 new breweries have opened over the past year. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts, isn't it? It's as we've said, I think before, in that, if if you are stuck a little bit in your ways and you've just see spiraling costs and you can't get staff, it's really hard. If you are willing to kind of take a bit of a gamble and do something a bit different and do something a bit newer, I mean, again, that's a lot of these. We've talked about micro pubs and micro breweries and pop-ups in shops, etc. But again, I think 97 pubs closed between June and July this year.
They reckon 1,000 have closed since the beginning of the year, and in London, 1 in 7 licensed premises have closed. Now, new breweries opening. It's what are these breweries? It's a lot easier now for people to buy a microbrew kit and suddenly start calling themselves a brewery. I mean, we've even seen that last 5 years. Little microbreweries that have opened up and closed down again, and obviously they don't have the overheads like the bigger breweries. So yeah,
they're selling, and I think the difference now, Nick, is that they're selling direct, aren't they? Selling direct from their door. They've got a tap, they'll have a shop, they'll have an online shop. In the past, a brewery, you had to either buy your tied houses up, or you had to have your contracts with your clubs, etc. Whereas these days, say you can open a pub in your shed. You can open a tap room,
lot more what you would call an
online shop
industry.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. It's the longevity of those cottage industries, isn't it?
And not maybe you're probably just employing yourself and maybe 1 or 2 other people, and that's it, isn't it? So interesting to see kind of how that goes, really. So again, we'll probably catch up more news as we go through the next few weeks. So right, as I mentioned, we're going to finish off our crawl through the alphabet. So as I mentioned, I think we've done 7 podcasts now where we've covered 22 of the 26 letters of the alphabet. So tonight we're going to have 4 beers, 1 brewery, 1 town, and 2 pubs. And again, interesting, I don't think we all chose different items, whatever, wrong word really. So it was interesting. And I said we've already crossed T off. So we might also just at the end try and see if we can just quickly rack up X, Y, and Z, because they're the only letters that we missed off. So the E letter, which was interesting because I thought we might have a bit more variety here. We've all gone for a beer, or certainly a brewery linked to a beer. So I think, Bruce, you're going to kick us off. And I thought this came left field for me from you. So your E was a very well-known, sorry, is our number E, is our Bounce Patrol again, was a very known Turkish beer, Efes.
It was. I like Efes. I like the story of Efes because, of course, it's now actually owned by Europe's 5th biggest brewer. The company that have the Efes brew is brewed by. They've got an insanely long name. I've had it. It's brewed by Anadolu Efes. They're Europe's 5th largest brewer. But of course, when they decided to start brewing beer, what they did was that what should we do? So they went across to Germany. They've had a lot of German brewers to come down. So all beer in Turkey adheres to Bavarian German laws. If you're brewing beer in Germany, it's got to be brewed to Bavarian rules, which I think are really great. Efes, of course, accounts for 80% of all the beer sold in Turkey, but it's actually one of the world's biggest beer brands now. Actually, you know what the world's biggest beer brand is now, incidentally? What's the world's biggest beer brand?
It was Carlin. I don't know what it'll be.
Well, the world's biggest beer brand.
Variety. Well, Carlin's got
Budweiser, wasn't it?
It's now Bud Light. Bud Light's now
Bud Light.
Bud Light is now the world's biggest brand. So yeah, so I've got the straw that decided, well, we need to, do this properly. So they went to the Germans, of course, probably finest beer brewers in the world, and they kind of showed them how to brew this now. And of course, Efes Pils is the core beer brand. And of course, when you go there, there's only really this Tuborg to drink when you go to Turkey.
No. Me and Nick found something else. When last time we were in Turkey, we found Efes Dark, and then there's also Efes Special, which again, it's interesting because that dark is very, very much dunkel. So, like you say, Bruce, is very much linked. But I think, Nick, we got fed up of drinking the Pils, didn't we? And then we found out that we could drink dark as well.
I'm just trying to work out. I would call Efes a lager. Is this MalTravAle Ale, or is it wanky lager tittle tap?
No. Well, I think if it's brewed,
get it off the screen.
If it's brewed to the Bavarian rights laws, then I think it's ale. It's proper beer, isn't it? In the same way that my Thornbridge beer I've just drank is a hybrid beer as well. So interesting. Bruce chose Efes. So Efes Pilsen, I said, but if you ever get a chance, try and find some Efes Dark, which is very nice as well. Nicholas has also chosen a beer, and again from the brewery whose name we tend not to mention much on the podcast these days.
Hey,
he just Harry Potter all week with the kids.
He's just paid out to his staff.
and just opened the biggest pub in the UK, haven't they? In
blue chip dividend. He reckons each of his staff members are going to get 188 quid, going up to £250. So, yeah, well, I mentioned this already this evening, that if I go into Wetherspoons now, even though Wetherspoons is exceedingly cheap, if you get yourself a meal deal and you're entitled to an alcoholic drink that costs you about another £1.50, I reckon the best buy is to go for a bottle of Brewdog Elvis juice, because it's the biggest bottle they have in the fridge. It's a 660 milliliter bottle, which is more than a pint. And for a time, they'd actually reduced the ABV on it. They'd brought it down to about 5.5%. It's now gone back up to 6.5%. Whilst I'm not a big fan of very, very fruity beers, I've always enjoyed the taste of grapefruit. And obviously, Brewdog Elvis Juice is a grapefruit infused IPA. And with the extra strength to it as well, it makes it a more of a complex, rounded flavour. And I must admit that the other night when I was having me pint of Thornbridge Jaipur, and then followed that up with a big bottle of Elvis juice, and then went back on my Thornbridge Jaipur, talking about lager again, the Thornbridge Jaipur tasted like a pint of Carlsberg compared to the complex flavours and taste of the Elvis juice. So there's a top tip for you. When you go to Wetherspoons, you get your free alcoholic drink, go for a big, lovely bottle of Elvis juice.
It was interesting to know that on TUI now, again, the Brewdog Pale is their standard beer alongside Heineken and cider. So that was quite interesting. Funny though, all the cans were different. All the cans were the different colours and slightly different branding, which was interesting. But they're all Brewdog, so there we go. And I also have chosen a beer as well for my E, and I have chosen Exmoor Beast. Although I could have chosen Exmoor Gold, because that's quite a nice beer as well. But the Exmoor Beast is the kind of their darker beer, kind of very strong. I guess it's probably a bit like an ESB, an English strong bitter, 6.6%. Nick, last time me and you were drinking that was in Wetherspoons in Whitby, because they didn't have any Elvis juice. So I think if you remember, we ended up, or maybe it was because we could use that with our 50p's. So we were drinking Exmoor Beast. So you do found it, there. Obviously, you found a lot obviously down the southwest. It's always a pretty good beer.
I'd certainly
winter beer. It's a good beer.
Certainly recommend the Gold. I remember making myself poorly on that. The Sheffield Beer Festival 1994. I was doing A to E because I was actually working the beer festival and they had them in alphabetical order. So I went A to E, and I'd never heard of Exmoor beers before, obviously with them being down south. And I was basically stood in front of the Exmoor Gold barrel. And so for every beer that I served, I sort of was entitled to one myself. And once again, it's a light, it's a good, it's the light beer. It's a golden beer, but it's about 4.6, 4.7%. Yeah. So yeah, it was a lovely beer to drink, but after 6 or 7 pints of that, I was quite merry by the end of the evening.
So quite a range there. So FS and Bruce, Nick chose Elvis Juice Brewdog, and I've chosen Exmoor Beast. Right, let's move on.
I think Nick should have been forced to choose another option for people with a moral.
Well, after you
chose Brewdog in a Wetherspoons. I mean, good God.
No, Turkish as well.
I say I did wonder about E, because I mean I've just put a few again for those on YouTube. I've just thrown some ideas. I was just thinking about the other day. So we know Edinburgh. I thought, it's the Edinburgh Festival at the moment, Edinburgh Fringe, and Edinburgh. I know I've just been listening to podcasts today, the Moon of the Water podcast, and they say, Edinburgh probably is the pub capital of the UK, and we've talked about it quite a lot, haven't we, ourselves? We've all been in there drinking. We've also, of course, got the Spread Eagle in York, which is still around, maybe not quite.
No, it's not. It is a Lebanese restaurant.
All right, it's gone, has it? All right.
Walked past it the other day. I was well,
crying. Okay, we've got the Eagle and Child still in York, which is a pub that again we have frequented, which is quite a nice boozer.
You've got Everard's down your way.
Everard's, and they've got a new tap we keep saying we've got to go to, and then. Nick and I are going to Sheffield tomorrow, and so I've got a picture at the bottom of Eccleshall Road as well, which is a bit of a beer mecca in Sheffield, isn't it? Or very much Studentville, but it's
Eldridge Pope, go a bit retro.
So we've lots of it. Anyway, we didn't choose those, so let's move on. So we're on to R now, and I'm going to be sad to leave Jack Hardman with his alphabet songs. And again, I did just check in today, 3.29 million, sorry, 3,029,000 followers. That's going some minute. I mean, you must be making some serious dough. You've got over 3 million followers.
He's got a huge watch, hasn't he?
He's got a nice belt as well. So anyway, we'll say goodbye to Jack with his R letter. So I think, Nick, you're kicking us off here. as my computer starts to go onto a freeze. So for the R's, actually, we've chosen 2 pubs and another beer. Just doing something weird to our screen, and so it's not moving on. So, Nicholas, you've chosen a pub for the R.
Yeah,
it's what I've got the right pub when it comes up in a minute.
Okay. It's what I would class as my local now.
I'll come off share and I'll go back on it again. And it's not that one.
No, that's not it. No, I have been in there though. Yeah.
There we go.
Out of the window.
Your choice is the Royal Oak Old Malton, which we mentioned several times. And in fact, we talked about it in a recent podcast because we were there for their beer fest, weren't we, at the start of the summer?
Royal Oak Bar and Kitchen, as it's officially called, or the Old Malton Royal Oak, as we would know it, because there's also a Royal Oak in the middle of the marketplace, and the 2 pubs are quite some distance apart, not just in actual physical distance, but in terms of what they offer and the sort of clientele that go in there. So yeah, this is the Old Malton Royal Oak. It's a nice 20-minute walk from me, along the River Derwent, through the fields that used to be where the old Roman fort was and Lady Spring Wood. So it's a lovely walk up there on a nice summer's evening, or even when the weather's not so great, because you get the old blood system pumping, and then the carrot at the end of the stick is always the guarantee of at least 1, 2, 3 decent beers in the Oak. Steve does the paddles in there, so you can try. He has 4 real ales on permanently now, predominantly always Yorkshire based. So you can try the paddle of 3/3 and then decide which is your favourite. He always has Leeds best on there as well as a permanent one. Good food as well. We were in there on Wednesday night having our midweek tea. Nice to see a lot of holidaymakers in, all really enjoying it. Slight twist on his menu. Steve lived in South Africa for many years, so he has various different meals called the Gatsby. Everybody who's been to South Africa before. He also does, what else does he do? He does the bunny chow, which is a hollowed out bread loaf, and he puts some chicken curry in there. And he also had a boer bang on the other night. But yeah, food and drink, certainly the problem in Malton now is, we've lost a lot of the pubs, and certainly finding somewhere to eat on an evening can be a struggle sometimes as well. So there'll always be a warm welcome at the Royal Oak Pub and Kitchen in Old Malton.
Very good choice. So I'm sticking with pub because I think I'm on next. And Bruce is on there, so I don't know where mine's going. Anyway, so go on then, Bruce. You've chosen another beer. And again, I thought this a bit left field. So you've chosen Marston's Oud Roger.
Yes, they are, because Roger. Well, of course, Old Roger for us had a special place in our heart, really, because of course we started drinking for our sort of, apart from Suburbs in Malton, our real ale fix. Had to come to York and go to the Spread Eagle down Walmgate, which was a fantastic pub. It was the only place you could get Taylor's beers, apart from the Tide House across the road in John Bull. But they always had Old Roger on, of course, 18, 19 years of age. I do think it was possibly slightly strong. It had an almost mythical status, didn't it?
It did.
Because Marston's wasn't a great sort of beer moth that it is now, and tons of pubs. It was just a brewery, even finding a part of pedigree was quite exciting. But they always had a Roger on, didn't it? And it was always that thing like, should we try one? Should we try one? Try one later on. I remember it having incredibly sweet sort of sherry aftertaste. I've not had one in years and years. When I thought about it, I was quite shocked to see that it's still sort of widely available. I never see it on draft anywhere now, so I think it's possible.
No, I think it's merely bottled, and I think they only do it. Okay, it's seasonal. They don't do it all the time. But like you say, it's interesting that I think it is still the same recipe, still brewed by Marston's.
Yeah.
Again, when you're on YouTube, you can see they've slightly updated the graphics and things. It's still interesting. It stayed at 7.4%. So like you say, I mean, back in the 80s, that was a strong bloody beer, wasn't it?
That was.
It really was. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't right now, would you? But that was incredibly, in those days, it was just unheard of, wasn't it? So it was a real big thing.
Well, I guess there was all peculiar, wasn't it? Which wasn't quite as strong.
No.
Obviously, Sotheby's, where we used to drink, they brought out Old Bob, which was a kind of similar kind of brew. I mean, this is almost kind of a barley wine, isn't it? I mean, it's very much that style, that old English style. I mean, obviously, when I went to Loughborough University, obviously being in the Midlands, and the Griffin was a Marston's pub, and this was, like you said, a bit of a rite of a passage that every new student had to go down and try and drink a pint of this, and not many people could drink a pint of Old Roger, got to say. It's a bit like
bit like Robinson's Old Tom, isn't it?
Yeah, that kind of style, that old English style, really. So interesting.
Where do you get that right up from, though, Mike, on screen?
That's from the brewery.
Because I would question that a recipe that was 500 years old was using hops 500 years ago. Hops weren't around 500 years ago.
I've been doing lots of research recently. Do you know some of the first hops are actually found in York in about when the Vikings brought hops apparently, and when they were digging Coppergate, they actually found hops, and they reckon that they reckon that the Vikings began to use it because, of course, they were about to go off on their sea journeys. And obviously, one of the key things about hops is it stops beer going off. It's bacterial killing properties. So no, hops go back to Vikings, and it's a bit of a myth that they're more recent. So anyway, we'll come back to that because there's some very interesting facts recently about York and beer. So where's my bit gone then? So I've lost my bit. My bit's there. So my R is one that we've mentioned quite a few times. If I remember, mentioned it in the last podcast, possibly, because I think that when we were talking about L's, I talked about Liverpool. I talked about Hardman Street, where the bombed out church is. The top of that street is the Philharmonic, across from the Philharmonic Music Centre, music, whatever it is. And halfway down Hardman Street, just down from the Fly in the Loaf, up a little street, is the Roscoe Head. And this is a pub that really fantastic pub, 35 years. In the same family, a traditional Liverpool backstreet boozer was threatened with closure. I remember, I think we've covered that on the podcast, didn't we? Just after lockdown, or it was during lockdown, it was going to be closed. The landlord was going to sell up, and thankfully, the landlady there managed to save the Roscoe Head. So, named after William Roscoe, who was quite a big beef in slavery, a bit like Wilberforce, one of the contemporary visitors. Always have 6 beers on. I think they always have landlord on as a regular, and I think they always have Tetleys on, and then they also have 4 rotating casks. It can be a little bit. I think we mentioned last time. It's a funny little place, really. There's 2 rooms. We tend to head towards the right hand side, the little snug lounge there, because you normally get a few locals sat at the bar. But it's been Camera Pub of the Year forever in Liverpool. So Roscoe Head. It's worth going to. You get a lovely view. If you stand out of that Donton left, you get a lovely view of the Catholic Cathedral as well, which is literally at the end of that street, and it's kind of opened up there as well. And the other way is the bombed out church. If you look the other way, you see the bombed out church. So it's pretty central, not far from Lime Street, probably about 6 minutes walk. Past the not the chemist, what's the pharmacy? The pharmacy pubs on that road as well. The famous Crown, as you
pharmacy dispensary.
Dispensary, sorry, that was it. Yeah, that dispensary. So it's kind of in that pub hinterland. So Roscoe Head, definitely worth looking out for if you are heading to Liverpool. Right, we're on to the S's then. So S's again, we're going to have a brewery this time, a pub, and a venue, a visiting place. So, Bruce, for your S, you chose Britain's first seaside resort on the North Coast, which, of course, is the wonderful
Skegness.
Scarborough.
Yes, so I think Scarborough, it's a bit of a bad rap these days. It's considered, even people around here would dream of going to Scarborough. They all head to Whitby instead. Because it's got that little bit of kudos now where we'll sort of guide you reading.
Not on a Saturday afternoon, Bruce. I think you're safer in Scarborough because last time I was in Whitby on a Saturday afternoon, it was shocking. It was like York. It was just full of drunken gangs of people. Absolutely. Yeah. They're busting them down from Teesside and Tyneside now.
Right.
Probably because they're not allowed in most of the pubs up there. They're on pub bans. So, yeah, you've got coach companies shipping them down from Stanley, from Darlow, from all over. And it was horrible. And a colleague of mine went with her family as well. We didn't know that we were both going to Whitby on that same day. And before he even had a chance to tell her, she said, "Oh, we went to Whitby." She said, it was horrible. It was just gangs of loud people, like staggering about drunk at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, no, shocking. But anyway, sorry.
The Otley Road Run that managed to enter in the Observer this morning. There's an article in the Observer about the Otley Road Run. You mentioned, Bruce, last time when they're trying to crack down, aren't they? And they're trying, and I think they said that they turned 95 people away. I think on Friday afternoon this week.
How are they policing it then?
Well, basically, it sounds like the pubs themselves are policing it. In that if they think that you are already intoxicated, they're not letting you in their pub, and then they're radioing on to the next pub down the road to say, Skyrack said that we've just turned 95 away, and the next pub down the road, the famous Oak or what it was called.
Any landlord is breaking the law if they serve somebody.
Well, that's what they're saying. Yeah, that's what they're saying. So,
and there's a very special law in the licensing whereby you can not allow anybody service, and you don't have to give them a reason. It's 174, and I remember it because it's show them the door. 174 rhymes with show the door. So if somebody turns around, if you turn around to them and say, "I'm not serving you," and they turn around and say, "Why?" You just turn around and say, "Not serving you, don't have to give you a reason. Leave me pub. If you don't leave me pub, police will call, and then you can be fined 200 quid straight off, even if you've not broken any law." Well, you have broken law because you've refused to leave my premises. It always amazes me that people can get drunk, and yet who's serving them? Because I say, if somebody walks into a pub drunk, shouldn't be serving them anyway. It's one of those weird things, really. But
it ties with Nick's that are there. The article and the kind of Leeds publicans were saying that they felt it got a lot worse over the last since lockdown unlocked, really. And that what they're saying that whereas in the past it was good-hearted, it was groups of students, it was hen nights, they're saying now it's groups of men between 25 and 50, often from London, from down south, and basically the articles, they don't give a shit. They don't care that they're going to get banned because they're not going to be coming back. It's a day out for them. Jump on the train. The police are saying that they're already pissed when they arrive at Leeds Station, so they've started to turn people back as well at Leeds Station before they even get on the bloody run, because they've just sat on the train for 2.5 hours drinking. And they said the kind of the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't as fun and party going anymore. It was just hardcore drinking and then getting into fights and things. So anyway, so we did cover Scarborough in episode 10. Because me and Nick had done a little bit of a kind of a little tour of that coast. But Bruce, I've thrown a few pubs up here. So I don't know if these are the ones that you had in your mind as you were thinking about Scarborough.
Yeah, 3 of those definitely were. Yes, obviously the Hole in the Wall. I mean, I say for us 3, all that age now, 54, 55. We have Grumpy Malt, and of course our real destinations were primarily York, and then of course would be Scarborough. And our number 1 destination in Scarborough would be the Hole in the Wall, which is one of the bottom left-hand corner if you're looking on YouTube. It's on Vernon Road, which is a little road that links the town to the seafront, but not the main drag down. So it was always pretty quiet down there. That's where the Hole in the Wall was. But it was an actual oasis of rail ale, wasn't it? He always had, for those days, 5 or 6 different rail ales on, which was no mean feat getting those to Scarborough. Very interesting choice. Homemade foods by a friendly lady from the Hatch, about £3 for our lunch, didn't it? And it really was a fantastic little pub, the Hole in the Wall. And it still is going now. It seems to have a Marston's tie now. But it's not too unchanged inside. It's a long, narrow pub. Put some TVs, which shaved a bit, haven't they, Nick, really?
Yeah.
And I think really...
I think it's changed hands again, Brooks. That's a problem because it's a punch pub ultimately, I think it was. I don't think it was free house, and it's changed landlord, again and again and again.
They've done better sticking to the original brief, really. But yeah, it's still 6 guys going. The Golden Ball, which last time I was in Scarborough was closed. I really hope they found someone to run it now. It's a Sam Smith's pub. I have to say, I think the front bar in that picture there, if you're there at dusk as the light's coming on, and when it's open, of course, I think is probably the finest seaside bar pub in the country. So it's got really early, it's dimly lit. You see all the lights flickering from the harbour, the boats bobbing up and down. It's absolutely fantastic, Golden Ball. The rest of the pub, I have to say, isn't that great, but it's usually no swearing, no children. But that front bar is absolutely astonishing.
It's like sitting in the rear of a galley and overlooking the harbour, isn't it, Bruce?
It is, yeah. It's absolutely stunning, yeah. I do well put reopen because it's not a trip to Scarborough without the Golden Ball. And on the top right hand side, that's the Leeds Arms, which went to many years ago. Then it closed, and now it's reopened. The guy who was running it, I believe, has come from the Riverside pub at Acaster Mulby. I did go in here on New Year's Day this year, and it was really back to its best again. Interesting choice of real community pub there. This is in the old town of Scarborough. It was packed. It's a small pub. It was packed. In fact, at COVID time, probably a great thing. It's on the road to the castle up in Scarborough, the Leeds Arms. It's just a one-rum boozer in the heart of the old town. Absolutely fantastic pub. No longer a bass house, but a great pub there. And then, of course, the other one is the North Riding Brew, which I've not been in for a long time, but I hear really, really good things about it.
Yeah, we were there last summer, Nick, weren't we?
Yeah.
We had a couple of visits in there. It was, again, it's not a great little shower, but I've got to say it's pretty ropey inside. Some fantastic windows, actually. Some wonderful windows with beer, kind of stained glass beers. Obviously, they have their own. It's a bit confusing, really. North Riding Beer is out at Snayton Brewery, but they claim that the pub does have a micro brewery on site as well. They mainly focus on their beers, but again, I think, Nick, there was a fantastic range when we were in there, weren't there? I mean, that was just after lockdown, remember rightly. Because the pub itself is.
They even have a fridge with some crafting, but looking at the clientele in there, it was surprising that anybody would go for a craft beer because there was obviously they had the regular locals, and then there was quite a few that were obviously holiday makers. But it was obvious that all they do is sit in the pub for the full week's holiday. You think, why come to Scarborough and sit in the same pub during the day?
This is up on the North Bay, near Peasone Park, very near to the cricket ground as well. So I think they do a lot of trade when they cross.
There's a lot of B&Bs and cheaper hotels and guest houses up there. Yeah.
And then the other one on the other side there is the Cask Inn, which again, probably back in the day, Bruce was one of our go-tos. Again, this is up near Valley Road, near the bridge over the kind of the road down to the beach. Again, we have been in there recently, Nick. It's not like it was. They still normally have a couple of good beers on. It still gets in the beer guide, but maybe again not quite its heyday. And then one I probably missed off, which is the Stumble Inn, isn't it? Which is a new micro beer pub, which is kind of on the way out of the town centre, up past the Stephen Joseph Theatre, which again we and Nick we've been there a few times.
And the one which we should explore next time we go, I've not been in for years. Up on the South Cliff, there used to be the Highlander Bar in the Stresser.
Oh yeah, They
had a microbrewery. I don't think they have that anymore. But even we were going the mid 1980s, the bar looked like 30 out of date, didn't it?
Yeah.
It had a tartan carpet and seats were posted in tartan. They had hundreds and hundreds of mostly empty whiskey bottles adorning there. It was an extraordinary place. I'd love to think it's just as it was, because what would it look like now? We must explore the next time.
No, I think you're right. I think it's the same, and I think they still do have a bit of a cask beer kind of focus as well, which is weird because it's basically a hotel bar.
McEwen's tartan, I bet. Tins of McEwen's tartan.
So Bruce's choice is Scarborough. Nick, you've gone back to something we talk about every bloody podcast. So you could really not do an SS with the.
Well, no, I would say two S's. Samuel Smiths. We can't say much more about Samuel Smiths. I was just thinking, really. my favourite Samuel Smiths pub, I suppose, will be Nellie's in Beverley. Whilst I've not been there for a while, because the rest of my family don't like it because it's dark and they say it's a bit grubby. So I would suggest it's going to be the Princess Louisa in London, or I actually like Chandos because the Chandos is the middle of the city. Always get a seat in there. Typical Sam Smith's pub. They've got those little one booths in there. So if you get one of those, you're right in the heart of the action, but you're sort of like separated as well. Plenty of Sam Smith's pubs in London, which is the reason why I like the Sam Smith's pubs down there, because you know what you're going to get. And yeah, fair play to Humphrey. You know, if you don't want idiots on the phones going in, certainly in London.
Unless you're Humphrey, just go to Wetherspoons and use your phone in Wetherspoons.
Well, yeah, and you know the fact that he's reinvested in the buildings, he's made sure that these pubs are surviving. Once again, you know, unless he's unless you know if he wasn't one of the richest blokes in Yorkshire, then you know I dare say his business model wouldn't be seen as being very successful. But fair play. In fact, I was just looking online, Mike, to see where Sam Smith's pubs are in Sheffield, and quite surprisingly. Well, and not I suppose, because obviously the pubs that were in Sheffield were owned by the rival breweries, but there's only the Brown Bear, which we might have a look into tomorrow, which is right in the middle of Sheffield. And then the only other five are actually on the outskirts in Grenoside, in Uterbridge, Stocksbridge. It's surprising that, you know, there aren't more Sam Smith's pubs actually in the Sheffield city. But I suppose I say that's because they were always those pubs were owned by Tennants and Wards and Stones and Whitbreads and all those sort of people. So
yeah, no, that's right. I see Bruce, unfortunately, the Trafalgar Bay again. We've mentioned a few times. Is I think it's shut, isn't it? Apparently, went very quick.
No, the report it was closed, and it was closed last weekend. But I've been down Nunnery Lane this afternoon on the bus on the way to Vanguard because we had to buy a new dining room table, and It's reopened. So
All right. Okay, that's good news, isn't it?
And I'm suspecting it's possibly because, of course, it's been Eber week. And for many people who come year after year after year, they'll go up to Trafalgar Bay. Then there's a path to the race course. And he knew that obviously they'll make thousands of pounds, probably by far the busiest week in that pub.
Yeah.
I would imagine he's thought, no, we're not.
And Humphrey is quite a bit of a racehorse guy, isn't he? Quite like his racing. Although again, I'm guessing the York Arms are still shut, is it, Bruce?
The York Arms still closed. The other one by the Riverside's open, but sadly the village pubs, with the exception of Appleton Roebuck, which we might try and get it to next weekend when you're up. That's reopened, but otherwise it's all pretty much bad news. Rather astonishingly, a few weeks ago, I think in May, Whitstide half term, we did find ourselves in Boston Spa and went to the General Admiral Elliot, and he spent £900,000 on it.
He mentioned that in the last podcast, Bruce. We had pictures of
we did.
Lovely all over the wall, beer mats on the wall.
In the toilets.
The toilets.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, since then we were in Sutton. I went on holiday, and the lady couldn't do any food, so we said, "Oh, we'll go to Bramham." And he said, "Oh, the pub's closed in Bramham." We said, "Oh, we'll go to Clifford." He goes, "Oh, Clifford's closed down." We said, "Oh, okay, we'll go to Boston Spa, the Admiral Elliot." He says that's closed as well. So actually, he spent £900,000 renovating the pub, and that, to the best of my understanding, he's closed down, which is extraordinary. Yeah.
Commercial hotel still closed in Knaresborough. I was there last Sunday. Sad to see that.
And I'm guessing the tap in Tadcaster, the Griffin and Horse is still
closed
as well, isn't it? Which is
commercially Knaresborough is fantastic.
I mean, I said I've done quite a lot, been doing quite a research in New York, and the York Arms again is a pub that is throughout York's history really, going back all the way back to the kind of Edwardian before that, and I know you mentioned the Rolling Stones. I think last on that podcast we did York, you mentioned that the Rolling Stones were frequent visitors there. Apparently the Clash were as well. Apparently the Clash, when they first had a concert outside, they had some new songs they wanted to try, so they just basically pitched up outside the York Arms and put an impromptu concert on, and then spent the night in the York Arms, and then I went back every time they're in the area. So what a shame it's shut. So to conclude, actually, which is a nice little circle, I think, in a way. So for my S, I have chosen that Sotheby's, where I guess the whole MalTravAle podcast ideas began, as we mentioned, back when we were kind of at school, where we were just leaving school, kind of me and Nick going to sixth form, Bruce starting the world of work. And Sotheby's was the pub that we would go into, Sotheby's Crown Hotel, very much kind of a Malton, whatever, legend, been there forever, in the same family for many, many years, dominates the main street in Malton. Is still alive now as the Rose and Crown, and still okay. But I think for Sotheby's at the time, and there's a nice picture here of Neil, who was the son of the family that continued the business through the 80s, 90s, and into the noughties. Neil, again, was I guess, maybe not quite the brains, but set the brewery up in the early 90s around the back of the pub, using some of the old stables. And Double Chance, a horse that won the Grand National, was it?
Double Chance
in the 1800s.
Yes, it
was the beer that they brewed, and actually did really well and became out. I don't think it was ever quite beer of Britain, but it was certainly nominated. And it might have got a bronze or a silver. And we mentioned Old Bob as well, and that did very well and won national awards as well. Unfortunately, didn't maybe quite last. Maybe wasn't quite as well as managed it could have been. Went off and did a few things and got brewed elsewhere, and then gradually, I guess the hotel pub brewery challenges. So I know Neil and family sold up a few years ago now, and went off. But I say the pub is still going. So for us, it was
I bumped into him and Karen were in Florios 2 weeks ago. So I said, "You're looking well." And he's actually working in the library in New York now. Neil.
Yeah.
Because he was in the butchers, so you have to bob in the library sometime, Bruce. Go and see him. I don't know which department he's in, but because Karen was working through York as well.
One that won't involve a lot of work, yeah.
So Bruce and I probably had our first ever drinks in there, probably when we were kind of, certainly for me.
That and the Globe, that and the New Globe.
Yeah, and the New Globe's Cluster 17. I do remember taking Nick there on his 18th birthday. It was a pub that we probably ended up in. And in fact, I think he disappeared at one point out of that pub. And a pub full of characters. And again, it was interesting, wasn't it? He had I guess he ended up having 3 or 4 rooms, different areas to drink. So So Sotheby's, yeah, the pub where it all began. So very good. So that was our whistle through that. So what we had left then, we had an X left. What could we have done for X?
Oh man, X. I'll be struggling with X.
I don't know any pubs.
We do need to think about it, but there's probably a pub called the Xavier or the Lord Xavier or something like that. Or
I mean, I guess you could maybe get away with Cross, couldn't you? But I'm just looking at there's Cross. No. I suppose you could have Castlemaine 4X. You could have Bateman's XXXB or XB or XXXB, couldn't you? I'm just seeing there's nothing else, I don't think. Apparently, there's a beer called Zebedee, which we could have for Z.
Yeah.
I guess Zodiac, and there must be a beer called Zodiac. I can't think of any names.
Well, what's the bar with
a lot, is there?
What's the bar with the shortest name in
Q?
Q. Oh, that's Q.
We had that.
Right,
I think we actually had that.
Yeah.
And the same with Y, really. I don't know why you go with Y. Pubs beginning with.
What's that Polish
Young's from London.
Young's. Yeah, we did mention. We mentioned that last time actually.
Yates's was a brewery of our not Yates's wine bar.
But Yates's brewery. Yeah.
Was a brewery of the 1980s for us, wasn't it?
It was. You're right. Yeah,
the Zetland Arms is a Z name pub that again I've seen a couple of Zetland Arms. Zombie Shack apparently there's a pub called Zombie Shack somewhere in the world.
The Zetland up in what's that one up in northeast? That's supposed to have a quite a unique historical interior, doesn't it? Is that the one I'm thinking about? Has it got stained glass windows or mirrors? Or
it rings a
like
bell.
That?
Yeah, it rings a bell. Rings a bell. Yeah. I'm just thinking any breweries. We got Wheel Ale Breweries with a W. We did W, didn't we?
Yeah.
Can't see there's any cruising with the Y. The Yard of Ale Brewing Company. There you go. So there are some. So anyway,
got Yellow. Black Sheep did a Yellow, didn't they, for the Tour de France, Tour de Yorkshire?
Oh yeah, they did.
So they did Yellow. Yeah.
Right, well, that ties us up then, because we're now done that bit. So we've got to start thinking some new stuff what we're going to do on the podcast. So, as I said, Nick and I are off to Sheffield tomorrow. Bit of an early birthday, delight for Nicholas. So we're going to hopefully tick a few off. The plan is we're going to head out to Fulwood at lunchtime, probably meet in the tap station. We're both going by train. Head out to Fulwood and visit one of the ale clubs, which apparently are really great venues. There's two. There's one towards Eccleshall Way and one in Fulford. We're going to go to the Abbeydale tap. They don't actually have a tap at the brewery, but they have a pub, the Rising Sun. So that's in Fulwood. We're going to go, and then I'm doing the first bit. So we're going to go to the Itchy Pig. We're going to try and get in the York Arms, because apparently they're one of the pubs that still do the new version of Stones bitter. That is brewed by name's just gone out of my head now. We might then try and get in the Lost Industry tap room, and then I'm going to hand over to Nick, who's going to take us to the centre of Sheffield and probably end up in Kelham Island and visit some of his old haunts. So we'll probably do a little podcast about that as well. As I mentioned, hopefully going to meet up next week, possibly on Sunday. Definitely in York, because I need to go and take some pictures of some old breweries and places. So we'll do that. Oh, that's what I was going to ask you about. What is the link with Sheffield and Carling Black Label, which you mentioned a little bit earlier on today? Sheffield has two very, whatever the word is, very, important.
Well, Carling's obviously was a Canadian brewery originally. It's now promoted as using British barley, isn't it? So it's a British lager, even though it's still owned by Canadians, is it, or whoever, or one of those massive?
I think it's Molson Coors these days.
Massive,
but, by all accounts, the Hope and Anchor Brewery in Sheffield, which was out Hillsborough Way, which formed the Northern Breweries of Great Britain in 1954, was the first brewery to actually brew Carling Black Label, as it was then, and the Hilltop pub in Sheffield, which is still going, was the first ever pub in the UK to serve draft Carling in 1965. So, and Carling obviously became the biggest selling beer of the UK. I think still is the biggest selling beer. I think it's now brewed in Tadcaster. A lot of things are, but there we go. Yeah. And again, I also found I'm doing a little bit of work on Stones as well. And apparently, Stones was again the biggest selling beer in was it sort of like 1985, 86 was the biggest selling beer as well. Before again, that was bought out by Bass Cherrington, and as we've mentioned now, got flogged out and brewed all over the place, and then was withdrawn eventually. But again, that's made a comeback. So again, a brewery has taken on the license and is brewing it back to the original.
You can still get in cans.
Yeah, well, they're apparently getting cans now as well. It's relaunched. They've got the license off Molson Coors.
Talking of cans, I won't have another one of those, Mike. Thanks. No. It was
so
like,
then
it
I say we'll have to get.
It was like a whiny dandelion and burdock.
We'll have to get our thinking caps on because we've done probably most of our tours. We did say we haven't actually done one on Malton, so we must do a pub crawl on Malton, especially where the pubs are still open at the moment. If the Spotted Cows reopen, then I think we probably need to do that. We probably can't really do much on York again. We did 3 podcasts on York in the past. So I think we're going to have to get our thinking caps on, guys, and come up with something that's a little bit new.
I think we should have a month of poetry.
A month of, well, we could do that as well. Right, obviously, there are so many different variations of pub podcasts now. It's always trying to find something that's a bit more niche. Although, again, obviously, some podcasts on the Opinions Beer O'Clock Show, they announced that they stopped. They did their last episode, I think, 2 weeks ago. So there is a massive gap there because they were a huge following. Obviously, there are the ones that I regularly listen to as well. So we will have to come up with some ideas about what we're going to do to get us through the cold winter, because winter is coming and it's going to be quite a long one by the sounds of it. So perhaps maybe on Sunday we do get together for a few beers. Probably on Sunday, Nick can join us after work. We will get our thinking caps on. So I think what we'll probably do is try and maybe meet up in a couple of weeks' time, and maybe me and Nick can give you a rundown of our little trip to Sheffield and how that went. And I think what we're hoping, Nick, is take a few new ones off out with it. And you obviously a place where you know quite well. We covered in episode 14, but we will get our thinking caps on. So I think, gents, that's going to be it for this evening. I say beery highlights for this will be going to Sheffield tomorrow. I know, Bruce, you were thinking about you might be able to sneak off, but is that a no-goer tomorrow?
Well, would it really? Yeah, I'll say I'm fixed in the morning. Yes.
Okay. We'll say if not, we'll definitely see.
Needed. Yeah.
We'll see each other on Sunday, hopefully in York, and we'll have a few beverages then as well. So I'll play the funky music to see us out. So thanks for listening, everybody. Again, as always, if you would please drop us a review if you could on wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you haven't watched the YouTube, maybe watch YouTube. And if you're watching YouTube, why not put us in the car or whatever on your headphones and listen to the podcast as well.
Or any ideas for
podcasts. Any ideas? Yeah.
Anything you want to hear us talking about. Something we might have covered before, but not covered in great enough detail. And you thought that was interesting. Wish they'd talked a bit more about it. Thank you all.
Bye.